Hey everybody, it's Mr. XStitch. I'm back, and this time I'm reviewing a book. It's the big one, Rosey Grier's Needlepoint for Men. Rosey Grier, in case you were unaware, was an American football phenomenon back in the 1970s. 6'5", weighing in at approximately 11 tons, he was part of the fearsome foursome that made Los Angeles Rams history. To say that he was a heck of a player is an understatement. It's fair to say that he became a legend in his own lifetime. He's still alive, I should point out now. He's a very respectable man. Hopefully I'll get to meet him one day. But I digress. One of the coolest things about Rosey was that he was in touch with his gentler side. He once appeared on Sesame Street doing a song called It's Alright to Cry, and in 1973 he published his book Needlepoint for Men. Now the cool thing about this was it was the first time that somebody had kind of challenged the notion that needlepoint wasn't just for little old ladies. You've heard me talk about it, I'm bound to talk about it again. It's a completely outmoded concept that is inherently linked to the concept of art versus craft and men versus women. But I'm not going to get into that now. Suffice to say, if you're around in the 1970s and you were in embroidery and you were a man, it was unlikely that you were going to stick your head up. And so it was absolutely fantastic that Rosey came along and decided to stand up and say, I needlepoint, and I'm proud of that fact. There's so much good stuff in this book. I'm going to take time to read a couple of bits and pieces because what he has written is absolute gold. The book itself is very of the time, but it's not a bad book. There's plenty of learning to be found in there. So let's have a little meander through the sections for a second. The book starts off, as all good needlepoint books do, with a bit of an exploration of the materials. Now this is a needlepoint book as opposed to maybe a cross stitch or an embroidery book, so the focus is quite narrow, but he goes on to explain about the different types of canvases that are available, even referring to a new plastic canvas that had come out on the market, 1973, isn't it? And then he talks about yarns, making sure that you're aware that, and this still sounds true today, make sure that all your threads and your colours come from the same batch so that you can ensure that your colour is consistently dyed. And he talks about needles as well. I think one of his favourite phrases is, before I got into this needlepoint business, threading the needle was just something I used to do on the football pitch. Nice one, Rosey. And that's what's cool about this book. You can definitely feel his character throughout the book. He's proud of what he's talking about and he's unashamed of it. The book starts with an intro about how Rosey got into needlepoint. Now, I often spend a bit of time telling people my story of how I got into cross stitch. I wanted something to do on the plane. I thought it'd be funny, look at a guy my size. I thought I'd take a moment or two just to read this chapter to you. This book is available, you can still buy it. There'll be a link in the show notes. However, it's pretty rare and it's not very cheap. So I mean, if you can get your hands on one, hold on to it. I'm keeping hold of my book, but you know, this thing's staying with me. It's going in my grave, mate. That's how good this book is. So I'm going to take the time to read a bit to you, just so you can enjoy what Rosey has to say. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Chapter 1. Getting into needlepoint. One of my favourite things is starting up conversations with strangers, playing with them a little and making them smile. Put me on a train or a plane and I'm at my best. I'll start introducing folks like I know every day, and before you know it we're all friends and everyone's day is just a little nicer. I also like to walk down the street and greet whoever passes. I just get such a kick out of people and their reactions. I get the same, but it's usually people screaming and running away. And that's pretty much how I got started with all this needlepoint business. My friend Terry Working had a job at a place called Jebba's in Beverly Hills. I would drop in to see her every now and again and see all these ladies coming in and out with their little bags full of yarns and needles and Lord know what else. I just kind of lounge around casual like. I really had no idea what the whole scene was about, just noticing all the comings and goings in this funny looking shop. One lady would walk in, take something out of her bag and talk about it with one of the shop people. After a lot of serious looking discussion, the customer would leave smiling, all of her problems solved. Well, this was right in my line. I'd rap about anything to anybody and I couldn't wait to jump in and be the expert to the next troubled customer. In she came and I flew in to action with my bluff act. I told her she was stitching the piece all wrong and that she'd have to rip everything out and start over again, letting me show her the correct procedure. Well, she was nice enough to listen to me, and really cool. She let me talk until I even started to believe that I knew what I was talking about. As it turns out, this particular woman was a wrong lady to mess with. She was Babs Shoemaker, the wife of the jockey Willie Shoemaker, and she was a top-notch needlepointer. Babs set everything in motion for me. She said that if I was going to hang out at Jebba's and be an expert, why bluff? I figured she was right, and I'd find out more about this stuff and then I'd really have something to talk about. The women who worked at the store were more than glad to help me. They started telling me all about stitches and needles, and patterns and blocking, and everything else you need to know for needlepoint. Before I knew it, I was on my way. Soon I was walking into Jebba's, not to throw the bull around but to discuss my projects and kibitz with all the other people coming in. Once I got into it, I began to realise that I was by no means the only man around. True, we were outnumbered by the ladies, but we formed a fraternity of fellows who had really discovered one of the most relaxing and enjoyable hobbies around. Project led to project, and before I knew it, I was even talking about my needlepoint on television. And now I want to share what I've learned with lots of other guys through this book. Sure, it's got me a lot of ribbing and teasing, and you'll probably run into some when you start too. If you've got a sense of humour though, it really won't bother you, and you'll be surprised how many of your friends will change their tune once they see some of your finished stuff. I had a weekly card game going for a couple of years, and the guys teased the hell out of me about my dainty little hobby. Would you believe that my weekly night with the guys has turned into us spending half our time playing cards and the other half needlepointing? If you'd have told me a couple of years ago that any of this would have happened, I would have laughed. So don't knock it till you tried it, as they say. Read on and you'll never regret it. I've tried to assemble all the basics here in a form that men can relate to easily. It's a beginner's book for men and boys, but I can guarantee that once you start, it won't be long before you'll be adding to your needlepoint library and repertoire as fast as you can. Thanks, Rosie. After that, in chapter 2, there's a brief history about needlepoint, which has some historical facts correct and others maybe a bit different. Who's to say? Come on, this is the 1970s. They didn't have Wikipedia like I had when I shamelessly ripped that off for my book. Huh? In section 7, there's an exploration of the different types of stitch available in needlepoint, including one that gets glossed over a bit quickly in my taste, called cross stitch. But hey, you know. And then he moves into specific sections with designs that you can copy. There's a section for sportsmen, there's a section for home and office, there's a section entitled Just For You, and my personal favourite, the section entitled For the Ladies in Your Life. And please allow me to read a small section of this as well. For the ladies in your life. Making or designing something for a special lady in your life can be better than sending her roses or wining and dining her in some classy joint. A needlepoint gift will show all the time and love that you put into it, and she'll love you for it. Hell yeah. One of the more interesting sections, chapter 13, Other Men in Needlepoint, has a selection of photographs of men doing their needlepoint. 1973, arguably the year that fashion forgot, and it's an interesting mix, but you know, fair play to the guys for sticking their heads up at the time. I'll probably look back, to be honest, on some of the pictures I've taken with my fellow man-broiderers from the years 2010 and onwards, and probably regret what I was doing and wearing at the time. But hey, it's a forward-thinking book from the 1970s. And besides, there's always a sense with some of these guys that maybe they went on to start billion-dollar companies. You just never can quite tell. And then there's a section, chapter 14, called Needlepoint for Boys. And this is a really nice section because it's a bit where Rosie stops and kind of talks to parents about like preconceived ideas and prejudices and stuff. So I'm just going to take a moment to read what he has to say there. We waste so much time as parents telling our kids what they should or shouldn't do. Little boys don't cry, little girls shouldn't play ball. It's all such a bunch of bull. We've got to learn to let our kids dig themselves and understand that dignity and pride come from the inside. And if you dig yourself and know you're beautiful, there's nothing that you can do that's wrong. Fortunately, I think we parents are getting better at this. Yeah. You know, I've been a parent now for about a year and a half, and I'm starting to realise that the stories that society tells us are things that we just generally accept. And, you know, being a man in the world of Stitch, I see stories and I disagree with them. So I'm quite mindful to make sure that my daughter grows up with all the opportunities that she can. Quite frankly, if she wants to become a car mechanic, that's going to be brilliant, because I'm crap at that and I want her to fix my car. But the point remains that we shouldn't put our judgments onto our children if we can help it. And I just think it's great that one of the most important things that Rosey had to say was that, you know, if men struggle with learning to do needlepoint, that's one thing, but they shouldn't, you know, stop their children from trying it. They should embrace all activities regardless of gender, and if people love doing a thing that's a bit unorthodox, brilliant, they found a thing that they love and that makes their life better. Final section of the book teaches you about finishing, blocking and mounting, ways to put your materials to good use, and in the centre of the book is what I consider to be the gold dust section, a selection of full colour photos of the man himself with many of his needlepoints. You'll enjoy a few of these photos throughout this video. They're quality. Look at him go and look at some of those designs. They're pretty rad, huh? There's also a library section at the back of the book which shows you many of the books that were available in 1973 to help you support your needlepoint. Be interesting to see if any of those are available now. Rosey Grier's Needlepoint for Men is an important book in the scheme of things. It's arguably not the most highly technical book. It is arguably not the most stylishly design-led book ever. But it stands as an important point in time. It is genuinely the first book that I can think of where a man has gone, it's alright to do needlepoint and I'm going to show you how to do it. Rosey Grier serves as a role model for a lot of us, and I know he served as a role model for me. When I started writing the Mr. XStitch Guide to Cross Stitch, get your copy here, I was really aware of his presence and aware of the steps that he'd put down, the foundations that he'd laid, that I was able to follow. Here was a man who was big, strong, with a massive heart, and who was unafraid to challenge stereotypes. This book is a classic, and I am, for one, very grateful that he made it. Rosey Grier's Needlepoint for Men, published in 1973 by Walker & Company. It's a classic book. It's getting a 9 out of 10 from me. Thanks for taking the time to watch this book review video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have plenty more book review videos to be coming up, and if you've got any recommendations for books that I should be reviewing, please leave a comment below. Until next time, my name is Mr. XStitch. I'm your ever-loving kingpin of contemporary embroidery, saying happy stitching. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did like the video, please feel free to like the video, and hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel as well. I'm Mr. XStitch, I'm the kingpin of contemporary embroidery, and I'm here to change the way you think about needlework. So if you're into that sort of thing, subscribe to the channel and join us for the ride. Thanks very much.